and welcome back to Perfect 10, the pop culture podcast where we explore the media we love. I'm your host, Michael Cohen. So, what exactly is a Perfect 10? It has nothing to do with a review score. A Perfect 10 is a piece of media that resonates with us, and hopefully you too. It's about the pop culture that shapes us and why we love it. Thank you to our Patreon producers, Curtis, Dan, Brian, Mark, and Sherston, and to all of our Patreon supporters. Your contributions make this podcast possible. You can head to patreon.com/thunderquack to get early access to Perfect 10, exclusive podcasts, and more. And keep an eye on your valuables because we're on the trail of the world's greatest thief, Lupin III, in Hayao Miyazaki's feature film directorial debut, Castle of Cagliostro, with Jonny Botsch from the Moosh Tube. Hey, Jonny, how's it going?
Hey, man. Thanks for inviting me.
This is really funny having you on the podcast because the last one that I did was with Derek from House of L, which is the first podcast that I ever listened to, and the thing that got me into podcasting. And now for the second episode this season, I'm recording with you, and you are the first person that I ever podcasted with.
Yeah, man, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, I at this point I think like 20 years ago.
Yeah, we are old.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, have you ever been on any of the Thunderquack podcasts before?
No, this is the first time
This is the first time.
Yeah, we
Jeez.
did the first podcast was the A3U podcast, and after that, I think you did because the A3U thing fell apart, and so then you ended up doing your own stuff, and I ended up doing stuff for called Shop Talk for the comic shop, and so it just kind of went that way. And then I don't know, I don't know. I kind of feel like I floundered with the podcasts for a long time. Like I kept on doing them, but my biggest problem why I swapped over to YouTube was I feel like with a podcast, you need a crew. You need some other people to talk to, and you need them to be as I mean, I probably don't need to tell you. You've done so many shows, but like if you don't have someone who's equally as passionate and interested on doing this every week, because as much fun as it is to turn on the recording and then we just talk for an hour and a half, and that's wonderful. Sometimes people need to prepare, and if you were trying to get three people, like for Shop Talk, I would choose a comic or a movie, and then I'd say, all right, this is what we're going to do next week. And then you'd get to the next week and 2 out of 3 people show up and they're like, I didn't really have time to read the comic, so
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter, you just do the talking. And then I'm like, well, what's that about? And they're like, well, it's your show. And it's like, okay, well then I guess it might as well just be my show. So I think that's how I sort of fell out of it. But yeah, we did, I don't know, like 50 or 60 episodes, I think, way back in the day.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you did a lot of stuff because you had Fancore and all of that as well, and there were multiple shows within that sort of.
Yeah.
You kind of had your own mini network for a little while there, and I did do some stuff with you guys. Like I came over and did stuff with you, but yeah, it's funny to think that that you've never popped over here. But really, Perfect 10 is the first time that I've done a show that is specifically me bringing on guests, and it's exactly what you're talking about, right? It's
Well,
the
and
idea
also
of
you do a lot of Star Wars stuff, and I don't know
yeah,
that I'm like, I
yeah,
could talk some Star Wars, but especially because of the amount of love and generally speaking how the franchise has evolved over the last 15 years, I might not be the guy that people want to listen to about for stuff like that. So this show I think makes a little bit more sense.
yeah, yeah. It was I just don't. I don't think that I was ever really doing the right project to bring you onto, but now with this, it's like, oh yeah, I should grab Jonny and get him to come in talk about some of the stuff that he loves.
Well,
And so I
this
asked you, and you tossed. There were so many things that I thought were gonna come my
Yep.
way. I thought it would be like 80s schlock or like action or something
Right.
like along those lines. And you go, what about Cagliostro? And I'm like, yeah, of course, yeah, yes. Like, it's such a great movie, and something that we really haven't covered on Perfect 10 yet, which is Miyazaki, right?
Well,
So
yeah. So that's interesting. So when you said, I can pick anything and it's a perfect 10, now my kid knows this because I drive her nuts. She's 10, and for like 5 years now, she's like, "What's your favorite color?" And I'm like, "I don't have one." she's like, "What's your favorite food?" And I'm like, "I really don't have one." "What's your favorite season?" And I'm like, "Man, you need all 4 seasons to make the year. Each one is great, but even in the summer, if you love the sun, it gets to that part where it's just too effing hot and you want it to be cold again." So I don't really do favorites exactly like that, but I mean, I do have some favorites. And so when you said, pick a perfect 10, the first two things that came to my mind, I just thought were too obvious when it comes to me, which would have been my two favorite movies of all time, Big Trouble in Little China and The Burbs. And I knew
Hmm.
that I'm sure that we could have done a show on that, and it would have been just as interesting as whatever we're going to talk about today. Um, but it was like my second thought. I was like, no, this has to be Castle of Cagliostro. And I didn't initially, when I messaged you back, I was like, do I have to tell you what it is or can it be a surprise? And you were like, oh, you got to tell me because I got to do this intro. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, fine. But there's a specific reason why I'm on this show and I picked Castle of Cagliostro. Do you happen to know why that might be?
Oh man.
So the reason is because, as you have already mentioned at the beginning here, that the first podcast that you and I ever were on were one that we were on together. But way early on, maybe the second Lupin thing I'd ever seen was Castle of Cagliostro, because you bought it for me and gave it to me. And the copy that I just watched, like yesterday or the day before with my kid to remind myself, refresh myself, because it's been a few years, is the copy that you gave me. And so as soon as you were like perfect 10, and I was like looking around my office thinking like, what's it going to be? I don't want to be too obvious. I don't want to pick something that somebody else has already chosen. I was like, this is the thing. This is 100%, because it's it references our friendship and it goes back like 15, more than 50, it's like what, 20 years. It would have been, because
Yeah.
it's around the same time that we did that podcast. And so I
Yeah.
think it was a Christmas and we were all at ages 3 and up, and we were doing like, gifts, I think, for that year. And you were like, this is like the greatest movie that was ever made, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, well, we'll see about that. But now here we are. I also should mention that while I chose Castle of Cagliostro, rewatching it and then reacquainting myself with a bunch of the other stuff. Like right now, I've got season 1 of Lupin on mute playing in the background. I kind of think that if you were to just say Lupin the Third as a perfect 10 franchise, like as the
Hmm.
whole thing, I think that's applicable as well, because it's clearly one of the most prolific, successful, and enjoyable franchises, with such a huge breadth of work between the animated things, the live action movies, the OVA specials. There's almost like a new movie every year that comes out from it, and it's so incredibly influential.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
yeah, so that is why I chose it.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. That's so funny. Because I don't remember, I don't remember getting it for you,
Oh, yeah.
but I remember us talking about it for sure. But I didn't remember that I bought you a copy of it. So that's kind of even better.
Yeah.
Um, but before we jump into sort of like our deep dive on it, I just want to give everybody the primer on exactly what is Lupin the Third.
For
And
sure.
this is sort of to your point. I was like, do I just say what's Castle of Cagliostro? No, I have to give
Right.
the primer for the whole franchise, right?
Totally.
So here we go. Lupin the Third is a series of manga, anime, and feature films created by Monkey Punch in 1967, starring the grandson of the gentleman thief Arsène Lupin, along with his cast of lovable criminal cohorts, and of course the dogged Interpol Inspector Zenigata. Lupin is always on the hunt for the next big score. Blending zany comedy with James Bond inspired spectacle, Lupin III quickly became one of the most popular manga in Japan, leading to multiple seasons of anime and establishing the iconic jazz soundtrack the series is known for. In 1979, The Castle of Cagliostro was released, helmed by renowned director Hayao Miyazaki. Though Cagliostro predates the creation of Studio Ghibli, it's still widely recognized as the first Ghibli film, bearing Miyazaki's signature style and craftsmanship. Cagliostro was the introduction of the character of Lupin to many in the wider international audience, despite Miyazaki's take on the series adding a more fantastical element to the story and giving Lupin himself more honorable motivations. So get ready for Lupin's greatest heist yet as we infiltrate the infamous Castle of Cagliostro. Lupin is a funny thing because I mean, I say created in 1967. Technically, 1965 is when Monkey Punch started working on the project, but the manga was first published in 67, um, and was much more. I mean, the series has always been very adult oriented, but it was much more sort of anti-hero.
Definitely.
But Miyazaki, when he did Castle of Cagliostro, he kind of almost like family friendly.
Yeah, and that's an
Mm,
interesting dynamic because
yeah.
that's something that's actually brought up. So Miyazaki, he directs this, and it is his first feature, but it's not the first time he works on Lupin because
Hmm.
the first series that came out, which they call the Green Jacket series, that there's 4 or 5 main series, and for the TV, not the movies. But for each one of the series, they're kind of recognized by the jacket he wears. So the first series is the green jacket. The second series is the red jacket, which I think is the most beloved. The third series is the Pink series, which I think is the 90s or late 80s, and or I think it's 90s, and it's the wackiest and the sort of most childish, and people kind of don't like it that much. And then in the 2000s, they did the Blue Jacket, which I think was a sort of a return to form. And when they did the original first series, Monkey Punch kind of bailed on it before the first episode comes out. He does the character designs, like the profiles for them in the show, and then he's like, "This is not my thing, and I don't want to do this," and he leaves. And then the
Hmm.
director that's left behind to kind of assemble this, he takes, I think it's the first 9 episodes or something, he takes a very edgy approach, like you were saying, how there's nudity. Fujiko is very objectified and everything. Lupin himself is a bit more of an overt misogynist, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of that sort of edgy thing, like you're saying, he's the villain. But the studio didn't like it because they wanted it to be more accessible to audiences. And so, two of the animators that were, I believe, working on it, one of them being Miyazaki, they sort of take over after episode 9, and they address the studio's concerns by giving Lupin more of a playful kind of feel and more of an innocence and that energy. And they go to flesh out Fujiko more as the series. And obviously, in Castle of Cagliostro, we also see that she's not just like she serves a function. She is her own character. She has more agency than just sort of being what she was designed to be originally by Monkey Punch, which is sort of a Bond girl amalgamation. In fact, I think that in the original manga, episode to episode, or chapter to chapter, or whatever you want to call it, uh, she's different girls, and they're all named Fujiko with different
Hmm.
hair and everything until he decides, well, I might as well just make this one specific person. So, yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. It's there's a lot of the James Bond influence in that early stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously at that time James Bond was a character that was very misogynistic and very
Yes.
objectifying and of women and all of that sort of stuff. So it was all kind of baked in there. But yeah,
And
Miyazaki
weird to try
definitely.
and do it in a children's cartoon as well.
Yeah. Yeah, but Miyazaki definitely brought it into. I think I think I think this is why it became more of a mainstream thing internationally, because with this film it was able to, this is basically anybody can watch it. There's a little bit of violence that I would say kind of, pushes it almost into that PG-13, but it's tame compared to a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's sort of when I was like reading up on it a little bit online in preparation for this, I was kind of surprised the only criticism I really ever heard for anything of Castle of Cagliostro is the very specific shift where Lupin in Castle of Cagliostro really isn't the same as he is in any other one of the Lupin series, being that he's just a straight up hero good guy in this. Even
Yeah.
though he's a gentleman thief, but there's no ambiguity to his morality. Whereas I think in most of the other series, you get the sense that he might betray somebody, or even though he's still a good guy and we still like him and everything, this is very much like the whole thing plays out more as a fairy tale in this more than any other Lupin vehicle, and I think that's totally the Miyazaki influence.
Yeah, that's where like I added in that piece of it of the there's a bit more of a fantastical element, right? And
Yeah,
the treasure ends up being this sort of like idea of a treasure rather than actual valuables, right? Like,
Totally.
it definitely ends up being more of a morality thing than it is just a straight up adventure with a, you know, a heist plot, right? Which is what most of Lupin's stories are, and then, you know, we throw in complications like, you know, different love interests and stuff like that in order to keep it spicy. But usually it's just sort of like, oh, here's a thing, and this is gonna be their hardest job yet, sort of thing, right?
Yeah, I
And
really
it's more,
like it is a direct reference or a direct influence, but I think that when you watch the show you don't really feel it. But I love that it's really like he's doing James Bond. Like
yeah.
Monkey Punch was like James Bond's amazing. The series, like you said, he started working on in 65. He doesn't get it out until 67. That time for James Bond is literally like he watched Goldfinger in 64, and the next year he started doing like this series. And I don't know, there's something really really amazing about that, and you can see it in, I don't want to be derogatory for the other entries of Lupin because I think there are so many great entries in there, but let's say some of the lesser quality ones, they're
Mhm.
still like they can be James Bond like villain who wants to destroy the world, and Lupin ascending a like a techno futuristic tower. You're like there's no real like limit to what it can be in this like globe trotting group of friends or whatever. And I really I'm a big James Bond fan as well, so like that really gels well with my sensibilities.
It's hard to pin down exactly what Lupin is because it is this sort of like he's obviously he's inspired by this literary character from 1905, right?
Yep.
The gentleman thief Arsène Lupin, and I so he is a direct descendant and all of that stuff. So there's very like there's already going into it this conceit of like, well, basically whatever needs to happen for the story to happen can it's all fair game, right?
Yes.
So yeah, sometimes it's technology. There's a couple of them. There's a couple of the movies where there's like magical stuff that goes even
Yep.
further than this one into the fantastical realm. But like this one having the Miyazaki influence, you've got the gyro, like the airplane thing, which like Miyazaki can't help himself. He's got to have some sort of a weird aircraft in there, and Lupin is able to like basically make, you know, 20-foot leaps and that sort of
Yes.
thing because he can. And you know, like right off the bat at the beginning of the movie when they drive the car up the side of the cliff in order to rescue the princess, right? Like
Yep.
it just right away we get introduced to the idea that like yeah, this is a cartoon, like the rules don't necessarily apply. um a signature move of Lupin's is the swimming through the air, right? Which
Yes.
so many other characters have aped after the fact, but it was really kind of like one of his signature things is that he would do that sort of like
It's
that
very
very
Tex Avery.
yeah.
Like the rowing the boat and then like the boat's on land, but the character's still rowing it and it's still going until they get back into water, kind of, you know.
Yeah,
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 stuff like
yeah.
that.
It's got yeah that Tex Avery Looney Tunes sort of aspect to it, for sure.
Um, you had mentioned a minute ago how Lupin is the grandson of Arsène Lupin, and one of the things I thought was interesting about the whole like franchise or this cast of characters is he's not the only one. So like I don't know if we really hadn't really touched on this, but basically Lupin is the master thief, and then he has a
mhm,
crew of two friends. Um, Goemon Ishikawa, who's like a samurai, like an old school samurai. He wears the robes. He only fights with a sword, and he has like this distinct code of honor. And then Jigen is this American friend he has who's kind of, I wanted to say he was influenced by Dirty Harry, but he precedes Dirty Harry because Dirty Harry's a 70s character, but the same idea. He's like a vigilante marksman. I think that he was has a history in the Yakuza, but he's like this master marksman and always on at Lupin's side. And then Fujiko Mine is the sort of femme fatale love interest. She's kind of everything to Lupin. She's a past lover. She's a competitor. She is like trusted and he loves her, but then in some things they're like enemies and betraying each other. She's equally like his equal in most ways to him. physically adept at fighting and everything, but also solving mysteries or hacking or whatever you need to do. She's often portrayed as a spy. And then the last one that's not technically a member of their crew, but is in every Lupin is Inspector Zenigata, is the police chief who is always on his trail, always
Mhm.
trying to defeat Lupin. And in many instances, they end up teaming up or they have this grudging respect with each other. The point that I wanted to make was that while Lupin is the grandson of Arsène Lupin, Goemon Ishikawa is like, I think, the 13th or the 8th descendant of Goemon, who himself is a historical figure as well as like a great samurai or a great rebel. There are movies that you can look up that are based on him. And Zenigata is also based off of another historical character of like a police chief or whoever that he could, I don't know if he's technically supposed to be a descendant of that guy, but they share the name and the
Mhm.
idea of what he represents. So it's interesting in that way, that Lupin is so closely tied to history in so many ways. I had watched a documentary before we did this, actually called "Why Cagliostro was the greatest movie." Like a perfect movie, and I was like, "Oh, that's the perfect thing to watch." And now I will say, I did not find that he explained why it was perfect, but he went into so much detail about all of this stuff, and yeah, it's just really fascinating to see. He did a whole section on how every single car is an actual real car or plane or helicopter based off of specific designs, some that like never came out, some that were only like, 100 were made and nobody has them anymore. But I guess some of the animators that did a bunch of the production design, this guy was like really obsessed with this. So you mentioned the gyrocopter. I think that gyrocopter is like one of the only things that like was just like a fake thing that
Yeah.
didn't really exist. But all the other cars that are in the series are all specifically chosen. And I don't know, I only found that out like yesterday, but watching the shows, I always thought these were fake cars, like the little at the beginning of this movie where they're in that little Citroen lemon, whatever that little
Yeah.
hatchback thing is. It's so iconic to Lupin, but I didn't even think, oh, that's a real car. I mean, I've seen cars that are similar, but that it's actually that car. It's not an approximation. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, yeah, that's what that I mean, the mechanical stuff in Miyazaki's work is always so kind of on point.
Yes. The clock tower
And
fight.
yeah, yeah, like just there are always these elements, and this is one of the reasons why I think this movie is so special and so important, is because this really is his first time going like, this is how I see it, right?
Right.
Miyazaki going like, this is what anime is to me. This is what my world looks like. And Lupin, Jigen, and Goemon, they kind of they look very much like they do in the manga,
Right,
but
yes.
all of the other characters start to have much more of that Miyazaki Studio Ghibli sort of look to them.
Oh yeah,
Um,
especially the guards in the palace and everything, the
yeah,
helmets, the adornments, all of that is just so incredibly Miyazaki. And that like gyrocopter, the fanciful, it's very
yeah.
much like a fantasy. Like it just feels like if they hadn't shown up on cars and in cars and whatnot, you could imagine this like almost taking place in like Castle in the Sky or something, where like the
Yeah,
world is similar but different, and but there is this like, I don't want to call it like whimsy because there's a lot of intrigue here, but um yeah, I don't know. There's a wedding, there's a duke, there's like a princess, there's a castle, there's a treasure, there's a secret, there's like these castle guards. Everything feels very fairy tale ish, and Lupin
yeah.
himself is like this charming, kind of like a Prince Charming or the knight that's going to rescue the damsel, and so all of those archetypes, which I don't think really appear in the other Lupins the way that it does here.
No, no, definitely not, right? Like you said it before, that Lupin is usually a bit more of a morally gray character. He is so heroic in this one.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that you get away with it because it establishes this idea that like he's been here before, and and he's got a history with this woman, right? So that's sort of, I always look at it and go like, that's why this one is different, is because this isn't about a heist. I think even from the outset, when like the thing that sort of sets off the story of the counterfeit money, I think it was an excuse to go back to Cagliostro, right? Like I think
Right.
he was kind of like looking at it as like, yeah, I've
I
always
can I
wanted
can
to go
finish this
try that
one.
heist
Yeah.
again. But really what it's about is this experience that he had with this girl. So there's something else going on there with the character that I think is a little bit deeper than his usual, hey, that's a really big diamond, we should steal it. Like
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely because it tied to his past, and
yeah.
so that kind of unlocks it for him. Yeah,
Yeah, it's got more than most Lupin stories. This one feels really like personal, right? Usually, it is more of the Bond thing, right?
yeah, totally. I was wondering if Castle of Cagliostro lends all the other animations for him afterwards to not have to prove that he does have a heart of gold, because Castle of Cagliostro demonstrates that so perfectly. So
Hmm.
now it's like, because I don't think there's going to be that many Lupin fans that have not seen Castle of Cagliostro, or that many people that see Lupin and don't even just start with the Miyazaki movie. And so giving him this moment is kind of like, Han Solo could go and shoot a few people in like not necessarily the most heroic way, because you've already watched the original trilogy and Han Solo's really like a good dude. He is going to come back for Luke. He is going to do the right thing,
Hmm.
so now when he is going to be a scoundrel later on, it's okay. As a viewer, you're okay because you know that he's really just decent, like a decent guy. And I think that Castle Cagliostro is so effective, and I don't know if I want to say it's ubiquitous across the franchise, or like that. I don't think that's the right word that I'm picking there, but it sets such a standard. And
Yeah.
because the movie is so well known, I think it lends itself a credibility that other movies don't have to prove that he's that guy anymore somehow.
Well, there's a funny element where like this movie really sets Miyazaki apart from a lot of other directors in Japan, and he, it's the thing that sort of propelled him into being able to create Studio Ghibli and then tell the stories that he wanted to tell, right? So it the movie, I think, stands apart from the rest of the Lupin series because of that connection to Miyazaki. And so it is oftentimes the portal into the world of Lupin because somebody has watched Castle in the Sky or Spirited Away, or they've watched Totoro or whatever first, right? They
Right.
they were introduced to Miyazaki through those things that I think are much more well known. But then they go back into the history and they go, well, this one's not this one. It doesn't say that this one is Ghibli, but I look at it and it totally looks like it's a Ghibli movie.
Yeah.
And then you watch it and you're like, well, because it is, it really is. It's just the first one, and he didn't own the characters, he didn't own the ideas, right? So it kind of sits slightly outside of that. But then people come into Lupin via Cagliostro and then go back and experience the other stuff. And so I think you're right, is that like that it does become sort of a bit of a standard. It's kind of like the Ninja Turtles, right? Where like most people think of the animated 1980s Ninja Turtles series as the baseline for Ninja Turtles, even though
Right.
it's not the origin of the Ninja Turtles,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
And then they watch the 1990s movie and go, oh well, this is like a really dark take, and it's like actually it's pretty light compared to the source material. Like
Yes.
and then you go back and you read the original series, especially like that first run of it, and you're like, oh, the Shredder dies in the first issue. like
Yeah.
like he,
Yeah.
he's not a going concern. Like the Shredder is so far from an important part of the story.
Well, and also I
um
think it's interesting that like Turtles is a good example, but like the original, like people do identify with the movies, or they identify with the cartoon, and usually it's the thing they grew up with, but
mhm,
not many people today loving the Turtles think of them as a parody. And yet that was
yeah,
like, the Shredder dies, but like Splinter is Stick from Daredevil, the foot are the hand. A lot of the visuals that people say, oh, that was so dark, is all kind of taken from Frank Miller's Daredevil, and that sort of that new edginess that comics were getting in the late 80s or the mid 80s or whatever, that stuff was happening. And yeah, so it is interesting the way that you're introduced to something kind of colors the rest of whatever that franchise is.
yeah.
This particular Castle of Cagliostro is, I believe it's the second of the animated movies they did for Lupin, and the first one, The Mystery of Mamo, comes out the year before that, and they were produced together and supposed to be released, I believe, intended to be a double feature. And it's a different director, and so it's kind of interesting. Like, I think that in a way, Miyazaki kind of overshadows Cagliostro, because I think, like, you're right. Most people are going to see Spirited Away or Ponyo
Yeah.
or whatever's coming out now and be like, "Oh man, I love Miyazaki. What else is there?" And eventually they'll find this one, and then that being their intro, it does kind of color and jade. I don't want to say jaded, but it does sort of shade everything in a certain light, and you might be kind of put off if you were to go from Castle of Cagliostro to the first series from the 70s. You'd be like, "Oh, this is a much uglier, meaner, edgier kind of thing than I was interested in." If you were to go forward from Cagliostro, you'd be like, "Oh, some of this gets a little too wacky or zany or cartoony, and it doesn't have the heart that Cagliostro had." But if you watch Mystery of Mamo, it feels like the flip side of the coin, where a lot of people that are Lupin fans find that equal as, like, as good in the world of Lupin, and also equally as influential for the tone of the other shows to come. And I kind of would agree with that, that if you watch Mystery of Mamo and then you watch the stuff after Cagliostro, the tones feel more similar, and that's maybe what makes Cagliostro stand out so much. Is Miyazaki is so, like, it's his movie. It almost transcends Lupin because it's Miyazaki, even though obviously it's also like one of the greatest of the Lupin series.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's a funny thing with that because it's it's like somebody basically coming in to direct an MCU film, getting the renown, and then going off and making something mind blowing afterwards. And then you go back and you watch that thing that they made in the MCU, and you're like, oh, I see where all of these influences were,
Yeah,
right? I mean, the MCU has generally worked in the opposite direction, where you've got some pretty visionary directors, and then they get tapped and brought into that, yeah, it's like as if you had reversed that, of like, here's this this known property, this thing that is basically a lock, right? Like, we're gonna put this movie out, people are gonna go see it because Lupin has this huge following. um and I think like that puts Miyazaki in the spotlight, but once Miyazaki has the spotlight, he takes it,
yeah,
right? Like, he and then he runs with it, and then you end up,
and deservedly
with
so.
Totoro and
Yeah.
everything that like really establishes him as a visionary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
disagreement from me there whatsoever. Question for you. Aside from Cagliostro, how deep do you go with Lupin? Like, have you seen a lot of the other series or movies or anything?
Yeah, I've seen I most of what I've seen, because I've never really gone back and watched much past like the first few episodes of the original series.
Okay.
Most of what I've watched is the movies and the OVAs, because that's what I had access to back in the
Yeah.
day. Was like, there was this, there was Momo, and then there's a couple of like the OVAs that you would get like collected on one VHS, right? So it was
Right.
whatever the one store in Penticton that had anime. It was whatever they had, and so I'm hard pressed to remember the titles of all of the OVAs, because it's like
Oh,
they all kind of end up blending together when you watch them.
there's a bajillion
Um,
of them. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So the actual like seasons of television I've never really watched,
Okay.
but for me, the thing that sticks the most with Lupin, and they when I think of the character, other than sort of like the striking visuals of it, I which like this Cagliostro kind of goes in its own direction with the Miyazaki aesthetic, but then when you look at the anime, and some of the other some of the OVAs, there's much more of the like 60s, like, like that mod sort of feeling to it. And the what I was gonna say is like the music is really what I connect with the most
Yeah.
in the series. So I had on CD, the soundtrack. Oh, wasn't actually a soundtrack. It was like basically a jazz record of a bunch of things, like the theme, but because there's like, we hear bits of it in this. We never actually really get the full Lupin theme in the movie. Fujiko has her own theme. Jigen and Goemon have their own themes. Zenigata has his own theme, that are sort of all throughout the series. And so there was this one album from, I want to say like the early 2000s, that did like basically like modern. I can't remember. It's like there's like it was like a specific musician basically came in and did like his interpretations of all of the themes, and
That's cool.
it's this incredible album that I would just listen to on repeat while I was drawing and stuff. So that really, like, to me is like I was introduced to the character by my friend Bill, um and then got this soundtrack and really just like listened to the music and just kind of like lived in that, and think about the character from that perspective more often than not.
I think that
But
that's a
yeah.
very, very accurate sort of assessment of the situation from the documentary that I was watching. And I don't know, this was a few years ago. Lupin generally has like almost every year there's like a new OVA or something that comes out to celebrate him the way they do in Japan, like with Power Rangers. Every year you just get a new incarnation of it. But in this documentary, they say that after the first season, which has a different composer, they get the Lupin composer guy. I don't know what his name is, but the guy who does the composing for that, and then that guy is the composer for Lupin going forward.
Mhm.
And like I say, like we're 2025. That was back in the 70s when the first show came out. So I can't speak to whether this guy's correct that all of these new incarnations all have him scoring, but I guess the majority of it is all of him. And you're right that the themes that those characters get, Jigen and Fujiko and Zenigata and everything, this guy apparently chose the themes based on the musical instruments that would represent them. So
Mhm.
while Jigen, for example, the American, he gets like a whistle, like it's more Western influenced, whereas Goemon will have more like traditional Japanese drums or something in the background. And so that's how he like created that. And then you're right, that becomes so iconic and it continues forward. The guy in the documentary was like, you might find that there's something off about season one, and it's because it's not the right music. I just thought that was really funny, but
Yeah.
it's true. Like that music does evoke something iconic that, I mean, John Williams is a perfect example of that. How many times does he just strike a theme so hard? The amount of amazing themes that you hum a few bars that he's done
Yeah.
and you immediately feel the movie. I think that that's what this guy does for Lupin the Third. So I think that's totally fair.
Yeah, and I mean honestly, I think Lupin is really responsible for the sort of the pop jazz, city jazz sort of movement
The
that
Cowboy
that
Bebop type thing.
that happens in anime and video games, right? Because
Yeah.
yeah, because Cowboy Bebop was exactly what I was going to bring up. Like Cowboy Bebop's opening music is directly influenced by Lupin. It's there because of Lupin, because Spike is a Lupin inspired character,
Yeah, I
right?
was just about to
Like,
say, like, that's nuts because Jet is Jigen,
yeah,
and like what's her name from Faye Valentine is Fujiko, and then the villain, the villain after at the end of the series, he fights a guy that's got a samurai sword. That's basically the Goemon character. And there's another character. This documentary was so unbelievably thorough. I was like, oh my god, I can't believe how much information you're throwing at me. But there was another character in one of the other episodes of Cowboy Bebop, and he is dressed exactly in the outfit with the green jacket from season one of Lupin. So the influence is super super heavy on that show. And
yeah.
you're right. The obviously the influence of Lupin is absolutely insane. I don't know if this is an appropriate time. I was going to wait until the end because that's what the guy did, but I was like, I'm going to remember some of this. I'm probably going to be able to bring up a factoid or two as I'm doing this podcast. But then he hit this section near the end where he wanted to express how much influence Lupin the Third had on the world of animation overall, and I was just kind of blown away. So I just jotted down a couple notes that he made that I thought were incredible. So one was Cowboy Bebop. The next was that DIC, or Deek as the end credits go, for the animation studio in the 80s, were planning to do a sequel to Lupin taking place in the future that would have been called Lupin the Eighth, and it would have been a descendant of Lupin, who is a descendant of Arsène Lupin, and that turned into Inspector Gadget. And the Mouse Detective movie from Disney, right, had the
Hmm.
clock fight. They did pretty much the exact same clock fight. And then Katzenberg was the guy who helmed and spearheaded that. And obviously, then they went off into this like golden age of Disney animation. Apparently, Solid Snake, his personality was designed on Lupin, which I never played those games, so I don't know. You'll appreciate April O'Neil in the animated series, her yellow jumpsuit and her hair.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
Fujiko because that's like a thing that she wore. And then this one I just thought was like the cutest little thing. I don't know how much influence it is, but I never noticed it before, and I love Lupin, so I just love this factoid. Chunk from Goonies, when he's in the pizza parlor and he's playing the arcade game, that arcade game is called Cliffhanger, and it's based off of using montages or whatever, like cells or something from Lupin's, so, and from Castle of Cagliostro specifically. So there's like an arcade cabinet out there where they made a game. I guess I don't know if it's like Space Ace or whatever, because I've never played this game, but they showed the screen and like, yeah, that's the little yellow car, and that's a screenshot from Castle of Cagliostro that made it into Goonies of all things.
That's funny.
Yeah,
That's hilarious because I've never noticed that when watching Goonies, but that's so good.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's a Lupin is one of those funny things where you start talking about it with someone, and I don't know how familiar the general audience is with this character. I don't think very familiar, but if you're into anime, sooner or later you learn about this character and the history that he has, and then you start learning that like, oh, this character is like foundational, right?
yeah.
That Inspector Gadget thing is so funny to me because I didn't know that, but I but
He
it
kind of
makes so
looks like
much sense.
Zenigata.
Well, he looks like Zenigata, and then there's also the component. So there's a really funny component in a lot of Lupin where, um, he and the boys are often, getting into their hijinks, and it's all like the action stuff. But when it comes to actually like solving whatever mystery is
You need a
going on,
Fujiko to step in.
it's always Fujiko, right?
Yeah.
It's always Fujiko. And so you can see that influence on Inspector Gadget because Gadget never does the job. He's an
Yeah.
idiot, right?
Totally.
But it's always Penny that figures it out, and is actually the one solving the mysteries. And it was always like this very subversive feminist idea in there, right?
Totally.
So I think that's so funny
It's
because
also
then
funny
the
because I
second that you
always,
point that out, it's like, well, obviously these were these were
right?
connected.
I always thought that Inspector Gadget was a riff on Clouseau from the Pink Panther, because they had the animated openings for the Pink Panther where you had
Yeah.
animated Peter Sellers, right? Okay. So like they had
Yeah,
those
yeah,
animated sequences, and he's got the little rain mac on, the rain jacket, and he's got the little hat, and he's a bumbling fool. And those movies came out in the 70s,
yeah.
Inspector Gadget in the 80s, and so I always assumed that they were just doing, like, minus the Pink Panther, a Clouseau type show. But yeah, then you find out a little bit deeper.
It's so funny. But you can connect those dots as well, right? Because obviously, Pink Panther and Clouseau and the French aspect of that. There's got to be some Lupin, like
Right?
Arsène Lupin, connections into that, right? And there was a series in the 90s. I think it was called Night Watch. It was on Teletoon, and it was about the original Arsène Lupin, right? Like it was sort of almost a superhero ish show, but he was the lead character. And so I actually had watched that before I'd watched any Lupin the Third, and so I kind of knew who that character was, and I hated that show. It would come on Teletoon, and I would be like, "Ugh,
Right.
this show's the worst." Um, so then, like when my friend Bill was like, "Oh, you should check out Lupin the Third," it's probably how it came up in conversation. Honestly, is that we were probably watching TV, and whatever ended, and then Night Watch came on, and I was like, "Oh, this show's so terrible." At which point he was probably like, "Well, you
Right.
should watch Lupin the Third. It's the same. It's his grandson, but it's like it's anime and it's awesome and
You know
whatever."
what's funny about the Arsène Lupin connection is that people who are listening that maybe already are familiar with Lupin would know that in the early days, I guess it would be the 80s, I think 91 might have been the first time that they got an English translation for anything coming over here. And um, the way that they had to address the legal issues because they didn't get permission from the Arsène Lupin,
Mhm.
the whoever the author was of that. the estate. They didn't get the permission, and so there were these legal issues when they did the translation. So sometimes in the early editions, Lupin is referred to as the Wolf instead, and sometimes I've got a DVD actually somewhere up there where they released him as Rupon with an R, which I just think is bizarre and hilarious.
Yeah.
But the one of the interesting things is that the Arsène Lupin character also faced a completely similar issue in its day because he wrote stories that included Sherlock Holmes, and the estate of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was like, nah, you can't do that. And so what his
Mhm.
solution was very similar. He re-released the story and just wrote the character to be Herlock Sholmes, and that was it. Left everything else the same, which I thought was really, really funny. But also, I don't know, one of those like stupid, ironical type situations where it's like you're trying to stop somebody for the exact same thing that the creator you're representing also did. Like, take a chill pill, bro. It's all good.
And then the fact that the characters, like the very subject matter itself, is
Yes.
thievery.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Copyright is such a it's such a sticky thing because the original intention of copyright law
Like a
was to
creator.
protect
Yes.
individuals, right?
Oh,
It
how
was to
far we have
protect
fallen.
artists, and yeah, it has become a tool of corporate America and the wider corporate world to to control things, right?
We've already discussed how today how like for video and stuff, or I mean maybe this was before the podcast, sorry, but we were discussing at some point about doing podcasts and whether we would, I do a video on a YouTube channel, and how filling the screen is the main thing that you have to do for that particular project, and I put myself on the screen not because I want to, but because it's the cheapest and easiest way to fill the screen. And every time I'm putting up, fair use is supposed to be video clips that are 10 seconds or less that you're using to do film criticism, to analyze, to transform the medium into something that you
Hmm.
can't just go and watch my product and get what you would have if you had watched the original product. And it does not matter. YouTube does not care. The rights holders don't care. They're just interested in shutting down. Oh, did you use like Tarantino films are really bad for this. Anytime I've had to use a Tarantino film, I'll pixelate it. I'll make it black and white. I'll mirror reverse it. It does not matter. They will know that what it is, and they'll go, too bad. And it's just the disgusting nature of like circumventing tools that were supposed to protect creators and are now being used by corporations
Yeah.
to stifle creativity is disgusting. I mean, Disney is probably one of the worst of this. We will be long dead and cold before they give up the rights to Mickey Mouse, which, a lot of times these creators are not here anymore. They're not even benefiting anymore. And these guys are like roasting their corpses, trying to keep the embers alive to just keep milking every dollar. And it's I'll get off my soapbox now, but yeah, really, really gross stuff.
No, it is, but I do think like it is such an interesting part of the conversation about this character, because you're in a bit of like a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen type of zone with it,
Yeah,
where it's like, well, these are literary characters. Can we not,
is nothing public domain anymore?
yeah,
Do we,
yeah,
the peons and the serfs, get nothing but breadcrumbs? Like, come on now. Especially because so many of the times it is the serfs and the peons that initially make the IP out of desperation to feed their family or a creative outlet or whatever it is, and they finally
exactly, yeah.
get it, and then some big corporation swoops in, and it's like, yes, we have absorbed you like the Borg, and resistance is futile.
Yeah, there's always this component when I'm talking about this stuff where it's like, Star Wars is always such a great example because people love to complain. They just love to bitch and moan about Star Wars, right? This isn't the Star Wars that I want. And it's like, well, you don't own Star Wars, so you don't get to determine what Star Wars is and isn't, right?
Yeah,
But at the same time, like, I don't know what would the world look like if we just let people do, whatever they wanted with these IPs, right?
better, better and
But
amazing, more
I mean,
amazinger.
the 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 thing with it is, and this is what it always comes back to for me, is that Star Wars is itself George Lucas getting around not being able to use an IP. He wanted to do Flash Gordon. They
Right.
wouldn't let him do Flash Gordon. He wrote his own Flash Gordon that then ends up superseding and completely overshadowing Flash Gordon. Like, people think of Flash Gordon as a joke and they think of Star Wars very seriously,
Right.
when really at the end of the day, you boil them down, they're the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Right. It is really just a reskin. And then, it's it's like, when you talk about like the 50 Shades of Grey being a fanfic of I Twilight, right, and all of that, and it's like, oh, well, then we just start changing things. You change the characters' names, you change this, change that, you change enough, and all of a sudden you've got your own thing. And that's exactly what George Lucas did, and that's why Star Wars is a pastiche of 1,000 different things,
Well,
right?
now we're getting into the whole realm as well of like, copyright becomes really interesting on creative works because nothing's really original and everyone is doing like even Lupin, like I kind of find it interesting over the last like 10 years really realizing that I feel like American culture is becoming, and I mean pop culture, but the way that we represent things, I think is becoming different or more similar, sorry, more similar to how Japanese pop culture is done, which feels like they create something and then they're like, hey, we got something that works. Every year, let's do another one. And we'll just keep trying to like tweak this idea and make it almost
Mm,
like an annual celebration. Lupin does it, Power Rangers does it, everything that's Sentai. And I kind of feel like American pop culture had a different sensibility, like the way that Star Wars works, or Star Trek for that matter, where the more shows you have, the more series you have, books, tie-ins, you really want it all to be this like massive saga of continuity. And now it feels like we're getting to a point where they're kind of embracing this Japanese idea of like, well, you had Batman in with Adam West, and then the 89 Batman is a different Batman, and the as we go forward, each Batman is its own thing. You're now just where Japan is, and that's just reinventing your very, very popular and extra cool wheel over and over and over again. But then you kind of realize that's exactly how styles and creativity happens. Is you're I was watching a video and somebody was talking about guitar playing and they were saying, you look at all these guitar players and who are the ones with the original voices and the way they express themselves and how do they get that way? And they go into this thing about how you learn all the things, all the techniques that Eddie Van Halen did and so did and this person did. And once you've mastered all of those, who you are and what you like will then determine how you use those tools to create something new. Now, if Eddie Van Halen comes along and says, "You're tapping on the fretboard, that's mine, bro," it's like, like we're all
yeah.
standing on the shoulders of giants and then building upwards. So when we get to copyrights, it's interesting because if you invent a new fuel pump for a car and it's mechanical, I suppose I don't want to say there isn't anything creative, obviously, about you making something that's new, but maybe the copyright on that is a little different than if you're writing a new story and it's based off of, the 12 stories that everybody tells or these archetypes, or you're working in the Western genre. You can't have a Western before you say, hey, I did cowboys. You can't do cowboys. Like, to a certain degree, we're all just kind of playing like you didn't create the podcast, right? But maybe you do
Hmm.
something different with the podcast. People that listen to your show aren't listening to that show because even within the realm of this thing that one person created, we're all able to play out different shades and colors, right? So, yeah. I don't know if I had a
Yeah,
point there, but
no, I mean, I think it just kind of all goes to the idea of like the distinction between a discipline like engineering, right?
right.
Where you're going to patent something because it's like, oh, we invented this thing that nothing else does it this way. So you patent that and you do that to protect yourself so that somebody else can't just manufacture. Somebody with more resources can't come along and just take your idea, manufacture it, and then you don't make any money off of the
Yeah.
idea that you came up with, right?
Whereas I feel like
And
now
that's
the
what,
the corporations are kind of going, no, no, we need to put a lock on it so that when the next people do something similar to what we do, but it's different,
yeah.
we're gonna fucking take that money.
Yeah, so then like copyright, that's exactly what happens, right? Is that copyright is meant to do the same thing, which is that like, oh, these two guys came up with this idea of a dude who can pick things up over his head and he can jump over buildings and he's got, x-ray vision and stuff. And the idea is like, oh, well, that's their thing. and we don't want somebody else to be able to come along and publish a similar comic, or too similar of a comic. It's got to be distinct enough in order to be, distinguished as its own product. But then you get corporations that come in, own these things, and then they've got the resources to use the law in their
Yeah.
favor, and they
Yeah.
bend it and they lobby
And
and
they
they do
bully.
this and they do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you end up with a complete perversion of the original intent of it, right?
My
um
my wife mentioned just yesterday when we were talking about this in a completely different arena, and I wasn't familiar with the story, but you might be. Are you familiar with, I guess, Nintendo is now trying to copyright uh, some sort of mechanic in a game where you get to call in your second character? And they're
oh
doing
no,
it
I didn't know that.
specific. Yeah, and they're specifically doing it to attack Pokemon apparently, because that's like something that you really need in Pokemon game. I really don't know, because I don't. That was the conversation I had with her. She was telling me like, "Isn't that crappy?" And I was like, "I don't know, because I don't know
Oh,
what it
okay.
is that they're doing."
Yeah, I think I know what it's referring to, because there's a game called Palmon that came out that is basically just Pokemon.
Okay.
Mechanically it is just Pokemon, but also it's very clear. People went into the code and they compared character models in Palmon to character models from I don't know if it was Sword and Shield or if it was Violet and Scarlet, but one of the recent Pokemon releases. And they went like, oh no, it's very clear that this is just a Lycan Rock model, and then they just tweaked it.
Right.
Like the proportions here are exactly the same. This is all exactly the same. This is too close to be a coincidence. So there's an instance of like the developer in China that made this Pokemon ripoff Palmon that they did literally infringe on copyright. They took other people's work and then they put it into their own video game, and they're trying to profit off of it, right?
Yeah, I just
But
find it.
then
Yeah. Go ahead.
Nintendo's attitude is like, well, if we can't get them on those grounds, if we can't prove that, then what we need
Uh,
to do is we need to prove that mechanically this is too similar to a thing that we created, that
right.
being the Pokemon mechanic of like switching in and out these characters.
I
Yeah,
really
I'm sure
hate
that that's
I
that's
hate all this legal stuff. It feels so antithetical to creativity, and like a lot of times the arena that I tend to see it in is like in music, and there's I'm not going to remember now what the two songs are, but like Radiohead's Creep got basically remade by not Harry Styles, Ed Sheeran, I think. But
yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
there's something like that, and it goes to court. And I've seen all kinds of analysis about this, and I can't get over. To me, I guess it is a blurred line, but if you're a professional musician and you choose four chords, and then you pick a melody, and you sing it, and you play it, and you record it, and before this album comes out, you had to have heard it thousands of times. You showed it to your friends, you showed it to legal, everyone's heard this thing. There's no way that you don't know, or no one said that, hey, you kind of wrote Radiohead again. Like
yeah,
they wrote that song and you wrote it, and I don't blame anybody for that. Like that is parallel, there's parallel thinking. There's the you're sort of in the back of your mind, everything you absorb through your eyes and your ears and that you think about is swirling around in your mental. And now, when you want to be creative, what are you drawing upon other than all these things? So, like, if I were to do an animation or a comic book or something, what are the chances that Lupin, aesthetics of Lupin might creep in there? Some facet, maybe nobody notices it. Maybe somebody notices it right away. Maybe it's really blatant, but yeah, I don't know. It's just really odd to me. Like, at what point do you draw the line? There was a point in the 2000s when Metallica got really litigious and they were suing all the people who were downloading off of Napster. And a rumor started online that they were starting a lawsuit, or they were copywriting the transition from E to F, because it's so prevalent in all of their songs. And it was like this really great joke because you kind of couldn't tell whether it was real or not. Like, are you guys really trying to say these two notes together? You own that now? Like, it's preposterous. And of course, it was just a joke, but it kind of proves the point that, like, hey, man, like, come on. We're all playing with 12 notes. Everyone's
yeah.
playing a guitar that makes rock music. Like, you're going to be able to have variations. But anyway, we're kind of getting a little off topic from
No,
Mr. Rupon.
I was gonna say I don't think that we are off topic, because I think that if Miyazaki himself were to listen to where this conversation has gone, he would be like sitting in the corner, taking drags on his cigarette with his eyes closed, going, like just like agreeing with us, because he's so like staunchly anti AI and like such a champion of creativity, that I'm sure that if you were to bring him into these conversations of like copyright and how it stifles things, and like what is it, it's like I think at the end of the day what it comes down to is uh like from a creative standpoint, this isn't the legal precedent or
Right.
anything, but just from like a moral standing, it's the disingenuous nature that some people bring to their art, where they go, I made this, right?
Right.
But to your point, it's like, you didn't make that. You absorbed everything around you, and then you put it all together. You learned from this person, you learned from that person, you enjoyed that thing, you were inspired by this, you were influenced by that, and then eventually it all comes together as one thing. And that there are some people, Ed Sheeran being an example, that'll be like, there's only like 3 pop songs,
Right.
and so I didn't steal from anybody. I came up with these on my own, but there's only so many combinations with when it comes to a pop song. You're gonna do these things, as opposed to George Lucas, who is like so upfront, so genuine about his influences. And when you say like, if you say to George Lucas, A New Hope is basically just the Hidden Fortress, he'll be like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
that's what I was doing. I saw the Hidden Fortress and I went, those guys, those two funny guys, that's my way in. That's how I start my Flash Gordon movie. And then he's like, oh, you just stole this character from that. You just stole this character from over here. And it's like, yes, absolutely. But it was George Lucas who had the idea of like, but what if the samurai was also a robot?
It's
Right?
funny. It's like Tarantino is kind of the ultimate master of that. Like his entire
Mm-hmm.
filmography is based. It's a pastiche of all the scenes and all his favorite moments and lines and musical cues and camera shots and all those ideas. You can literally just map it all out. Oh, this person
Yep.
got this cut off because of this, and this person said that, and no one looks at him and says like you stole it all. It's because he successfully repurposed it. And
Yeah, well,
so,
and
yeah,
like John Williams is part of this conversation as well, which people are always a little bit like, whenever I say that, people kind of like take a step back and they go, "No, but like John Williams created the movie soundtrack." And it's like, "No, John Williams didn't create the movie soundtrack. John Williams looked at opera and went, that's the musical style that should be on these films."
right,
And so he took Wagner and he went like, look at these leitmotifs, look at the way that we tell stories with the music in opera, of like, the character enters, and when the character enters, we play these 8 notes, right? And he took that and he went, that's what I'm going to do with every movie that I do. So that's why you end up with Darth Vader's theme and Indiana Jones's theme and Jaws and Jurassic Park, and the idea of leitmotifs becoming so integral to the storytelling of film. It didn't start with him.
right.
He pulled it from a thing, and that was probably pulled from somewhere, and back and back and back, right?
Do you
So,
think
but
that do you think that
it's the
creatives struggle now with all of this because like I'm starting to wonder in this conversation whether the legal aspect of all of these things start to impact how we represent our art. There seems to be a really
Mhm.
heavy influence or insistence, I should say, of everyone having to swear up and down that they're original and that it's theirs. And I'm wondering now if like you didn't have copyrights and if people were all able to borrow and bend and steal from each other or whatever, if everyone wouldn't care anymore because we'd all be on the same page to realize like there is nothing original under the sun. All of your ideas are generally going to be sort of smashed together from and cobbled together from all your experiences in life, and a lot of that is probably going to be different pieces of art because you're an artist. And so if we were to just embrace that in kind of the way that Tarantino does, but I mean, you could just rip off anything, and then if people don't like it or they think it's derivative, then maybe you just don't get success. And if you've reinvented the wheel like say Cowboy Bebop, where we can make very direct references to how this kind of feels. Cowboy Bebop kind of feels now to me like Lupin the Eighth that turned into Inspector
Mhm.
Gadget, but like clearly there was a huge influence there, and no, but but you wouldn't want to say that anymore, because if you said, oh yeah, no, I totally ripped that off, there would be some sort of legal battle. And so maybe there's a sense now, because of the situation, this rubric we're in, that people feel the need to crow about how great they are and how special this is, more so than they would necessarily otherwise, because there's real legal implications.
I think that it definitely influences things. Like I think on the studio level, for the people who are concerned about that, the the ones that are on the hook, right? The people who have
Right.
the liability. I think that that influence is coming from up there. But I honestly think like the conversation about originality and like, oh, this is, oh, I came up with this. I think that so much of that just comes out of the same tired, obnoxious art criticism that we've had for hundreds of years, right?
Right.
Where it's just everybody wants to believe that they have created something wholly unique, but the reality is that, there's nothing new under the sun, right?
Yeah.
And I think that likewise, audiences want to, this is where the whole hipster mentality comes from, right? Is that audiences want to be there first. They want the novelty and they want the prestige of having discovered the thing.
Yeah.
And so if something isn't new, then it's not discoverable. But the funny thing to me is
But
that a lot of the auteurs that we talk about, they do exactly this. And they're upfront about it and they're honest about it. And
right.
I think personally, it's in my ethos as an artist. And if you look at the projects that I do, if you look at like Enter the Nostalgiatron, which I just did, we are so upfront about the fact that this is Ninja Turtles, it
Right.
is He-Man, it is GI Joe. Like you can look at it and you can see all of those influences because I'm not hiding them, because I believe like that is actually how you create something new, right? Is that you take there are ingredients and it's the order in which you add them. It's the degree to which, it's like, and not everybody's going to like it as spicy and not everybody likes oregano, or, some people think cilantro tastes like soap. So, like it's to, you're doing it to your own taste. You're doing it based on your own influences and experiences.
You make a
But the
great
auteurs that
point.
we look at, that we celebrate, Tarantino, George
Yeah.
Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Edgar Wright, like looking at something like Scott Pilgrim, which like the source material it is essentially just homage and pastiche wrapped around a very classic story of, this loser coming of age, right?
Yeah.
And then Edgar Wright grabs it and he goes, well, I'm going to mash in all my stuff too. I'm going to take
Yeah.
all my film influences and put them in here. And then you get Chris Evans coming in and playing Lucas Lee in that movie, and his whole approach to the character, his whole performance is a pastiche. He's doing Clint Eastwood via Bruce Willis through the lens of Jean-Claude Van Damme, right?
Yeah.
Like like, and we look at that and we go, wow, this is so cool. I've never seen anything like this before.
I like the
But the reality is that you've seen every aspect of that before. You've just never seen it in that way
package that
together,
way. Correct.
presented, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's what Lupin is. Like Lupin is taking James Bond, it's taking Arsène Lupin, it's taking it's taking like when Miyazaki is doing this stuff, he's bringing in lots of like classical Japanese art and stuff like that into his stuff as well. Like we're mashing all of this stuff together in order to create something that we call new, but it's not that the components aren't new. The base elements are always going to be what the base elements are. We can only break things down so much,
Well, I think that you kind of
you
proved
know.
my point incorrect already, which I will concede, which I think was an interesting point, um, that if we were to look outside of the realm of a creative person creating something and then having to deal with these stupid copyrights and lawyers and everything because of a financial incentive to be original and not be vulnerable to any litigation, I guess the flip side of the coin, as you mentioned, is fans. And fans also, when you discover the band you really like before they get famous, there's a part of you that doesn't want to share that when they do get famous, and then you call them sellouts because they're not yours anymore, which is
Yeah.
ridiculous. Or when you discover a movie or a show or something, you feel like you know what it is and this is yours. Or one of my most favorite things that human beings do, because we're awful human beings, and it's a petty, stupid little thing, but I think everybody can relate to this, is the new movie's coming out and it's based on a book, and you go to the bookstore and you want to buy the book. And I think it's totally admirable and, a worthy endeavor for someone to feel like, I want to read the original source material so I know what it's like before I go into this adaptation, and that's cool. But then they get to the bookstore and the new edition of the book only has the movie poster on it, and so many people do not want to buy it. And the only reason, it's not that the book's different, it's because they want to put it on the shelf, and they want to look like they're not this person, but they want to look like the person that was in on it before everybody else was. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, but you're not that person. And what's wrong
Yeah.
with the exposure of a new thing, and everyone jumps on board because everyone wants to believe they are original and they are special and they found something. So maybe outside the legal issue that I was trying to bring up there, maybe it's just human nature that we all have that a certain amount of ego or something that makes us not want to, be the unoriginal one, the follower. We have to, that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, Western culture especially, and I think this is where that difference in perspective in the way that Japanese culture iterates on their ideas, and we tend to want to homogenize things, right? And I think it stems from the idea of rugged individualism, which goes back to the 1930s. It goes back to Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged and all of that stuff of like, oh, I am the singular hero, right? The
Yeah, I did
American
it myself.
monomyth that comes out of that. Like we want things in Western culture, and this is a thing that I've kind of been, working to deconstruct in myself, but that I didn't have to work very hard for because I've always been a fan of Eastern media, whether it's kung fu or anime, right? Like, and now the Korean stuff is coming in and influencing our culture in such a way that's really cool to see as well. And so we're getting more of that. We're getting more Bollywood. We're getting more of the Indian influence as well, right? Um, like those cultures look at these things so differently because they're not looking at it through the lens that we look at it of like everybody wants to look at Star Wars and figure out, why does Star Wars work? Is it Luke Skywalker or Han Solo? Who's your favorite character? This kind of
Right.
all ties back into that thing that your daughter is asking you of, like,
Yes.
what's your favorite blank? Who's your favorite Star Wars character? What's your favorite Star Wars movie? What's your favorite type of movie? And we want to like boil things down to these singular ideas because we all want to be the best at whatever, right? Like, pick your thing. Everybody picks one when, well, actually it's usually thrust upon us when we're kids, and then it becomes our whole identity. And then because that is our identity, we fight for it tooth and nail. And it just ends up creating a culture of, weirdly, antithetically, this homogenous ideology, which is more community than anything. But then we just fight with each other because, we all love Star Wars, we all love anime, we all love, Dragon Ball or Spider-Man, or pick your thing, pick your fandom. Everybody loves it. They say that they love it. But what is the defining characteristic of 99% of fandoms? Apparently, the Transformers fandom is the only exclusion of this, according to the internet, but I know enough people in the Transformers fandom to know that this isn't true. The one thing that all fandoms have in common is that nobody hates the thing they love as much as they do, right?
Right.
Like, it's so defining of a fan of, like, new Star Wars movie comes out. Whoa, those Star Wars fans, they're going to be the worst critics. They're going to say the worst things about it.
Oh, now,
Um,
yeah, now we're moving into like criticism, which I also have been giving a lot of thought to lately, because I don't, like, I think I find it too easy to pull things apart and
mhm.
critique them and be negative, and there's just, I don't want to act like, oh, there's no challenge there for me, but it just seems like such a base, easy thing when you see, like, not that this guy doesn't have any talent, but the guy that does the Red Letter Media ripping Star Wars apart stuff, like,
Yep.
yeah, I just feel like that guy has channeled a part of me that, and you've been in the shop before. You've heard my, like, I could go on a tear and a rant. I'm pretty sure some of the earlier podcasts that we were on, I did a lot of that.
Yep.
Um, but I don't see that as being very constructive or very challenging. I think it's maybe it's just my personality type that I find it easy to tear things down. But when I decided to do my YouTube channel, I find myself a little conflicted that I'm always I could easily err into a critique where I'm just making fun of all this stuff or telling you why it sucks so bad. And I find myself being like, I don't want to inject my personal opinion. Now I do because that's just it's me writing it. You're going to get my opinion no matter what, but I really do try and temper all of that because I feel like criticism is too easy and it doesn't hold for
Hmm.
me a huge amount of weight in the sense that I'll give you an example. So a bunch of years ago, I'm jogging to do a sun run 10K thing, and I got 8 weeks to like get up to being able to run for an hour, and I'm listening to music in my headphones, and I am a child of grunge music and new metal in that whole era, and so the term butt rock is something that a genre that I generally enjoy, and specifically if I'm jogging because it's keeping this beat that I can like run to. It's got a aggression and an anger that fuels me while I'm running. I want to feel that pulse and I want to move forward. And I was listening to the Godsmack. Godsmack had an album a bunch of years ago and they hadn't been out for a while. And I'm not a huge Godsmack fan, but I was like, I'll put this on, I'll listen to it. And it became like a score for me to like, I do a 20-minute run or a half-hour run. I know it's X amount of tracks, and these tracks all kind of fill exactly what I need. And so I was enjoying it. And then one day, Anthony Fantano from the Needle Drop did a review, and I don't remember whether it was specifically about the album or whether he just threw it in as like, a bunch of reviews. He'll do like a thing with track roundup or whatever where he'll talk about a bunch of stuff. And when he gets to that album, he's just like, it sucks, it's awful, it's really dumb, it's really derivative, it's just this standard butt rock crap, it's not inspired, I hate the lyrics. And he tears it apart in this like really incredibly efficient way that I couldn't argue with anything he was saying, and it made me feel like, why do I like this? I have terrible taste.
Hmm.
And it took me a while to kind of realize like, this is stupid. Everyone has different tastes. Tastes are
Yep.
subjective, hence part of like what this show is based off of. And so, choosing a perfect 10 or choosing something that you like, I mean, it's conditional on a bunch of things. Would I argue with somebody that that Godsmack album was a top 10 album ever? No, I wouldn't. Would I try and argue Anthony Fantano's points about how he ripped it apart? No, I wouldn't. It was it the perfect thing for me to jog to for a half hour? Absolutely. And did I get enjoyment out of that? Yeah. I didn't have to look at it that deeply. But that's, that criticism aspect of things, I think people don't realize, if you are going to criticize something and rip it apart, then what was the point of you doing that? Are you just crapping on somebody else's work? Are you not aware that lots of other people maybe like it? And the criticism when you tear something apart, like maybe, sorry to go on a rant here, but um, if we look at, say, like the Drake Kendrick battle that just played over the last year, Kendrick is basically critiquing and ripping apart Drake's career and his persona. And to that, I don't have a problem because I feel like what Drake represented was toxic, it was commercial, it was
Hmm.
corporate, it was bland. And Kendrick was setting a new standard for like what people could have access to for hip hop and realigning an industry. So I do think there's value there, but that wasn't just like I don't like his bland music. It was like I fundamentally disagree with what you represent. What you represent is dangerous or it's hurtful or you know what I mean? Like it's not contributing.
Yep.
So I don't know. I now when I review things, I got a video that I'm working on right now about some really, really, really terrible movies, and I'm gonna have to say that they're terrible in there, but I really don't want to make that the focus. I want to acknowledge that I'm gonna be talking to possibly a fan base that's out there. I'm talking about creators that have poured their heart into something, and that I want to respect that they played the game and they made a product, and it's good enough that I'm talking about it. So maybe I can be more factual and more information based than opinion based when I do my stuff. Sorry, now I feel like we really got off track from where we were a second
No,
ago. But yeah, good
but
conversation.
this is all like, so you said it like that this is at the core of what Perfect 10 is about. as a podcast. Like it's, and I say it on almost every episode, that this is essentially the mission statement, which is that like I did that thing for so long. That's what Quiver was. That's what Frontlines was. It's what even Rebel Cells now continues to be, to a certain degree. But I think what happens is, I think that as we actually mature and get older, I and with age come, hopefully sometimes comes wisdom. um there is a level of discernment there of like, it does this criticism serve us, right?
Yeah.
And I think that when you're young and you're trying to make a name for yourself and you're trying to stand out, and you want to be taken seriously, the fastest pathway to that is to take down other people's work. It's so much
Mm.
easier
Yeah.
to be critical of the latest cool thing than it is to make the latest cool thing, right? Like the person who gets to sit on the top of the mountain, Kendrick, right? Taylor Swift, like
Yeah.
whoever it is that's, right now, K-pop demon hunters. I'm waiting for the backlash. I'm waiting for the hate to
It'll
start
never come.
coming.
It's
And
a perfect 10. I should have
I
chosen
mean, it
that.
is a
My kid
perfect
would be
10.
so happy.
I don't know if there's ever been a more perfect 10 than K-pop demon hunters, but I'm waiting for it, right? Because eventually it'll hit the popularity, and I think it'll actually probably hit in this next month or so, because I think it's going to come along with all of these kids in Halloween costumes, and
Right.
there's going to be this thing of like, oh, this has become so corporate. This has become so blah blah blah, right? I think there will be a narrative where somebody will unlock some criticism of it, of like, oh, Netflix wins, right? This is bad for everything. The only real criticism that I've seen come out of it that I think is valid, but I think that people, again, they take too far, because they're trying to make a name for themselves, is this idea that like Netflix announcing sequels is a bad thing. Oh, they're
Right.
learning the wrong lesson from this. What people resonated with was that this was an original idea. I think that that's a component of it for sure. I also think it's just a very, very well written story. I think that it's just
It's great.
incredibly well executed animation. I think
Great
the songs
themes.
are just
Yep.
every it's what it is, honestly. And this is at the core of why criticism, I think, is generally, it goes into a toxic zone, is because it disregards the fact that the reason K-pop Demon Hunters is what it is not because of an individual component. There is no magic bullet or secret sauce to it. There were hundreds of people that worked on a project that it resonated with them. They put their hearts and their souls into it. It came from a genuine place. It came from a real place of this very personal story. Um, and that's what comes across to us on screen. That's what comes across to us in the music, whether it's the director of the film putting her experience into this idea of shame and blah blah blah, or whether it's EJ struggling to be a K-pop, like somebody in the K-pop world, and then
Right.
finally finding her way in through this, right? Like that stuff, all ends up coming out through the art, because they're expressing themselves. That's what we end up resonating with. That's where the subjectivity is valuable, because and that's the purpose of this podcast, is to dig into that. Like, it's really easy for us to dismiss subjective feelings about a piece of media and say like, oh, well, it's just nostalgia. Oh, it's just this, it's just that.
Yeah.
But my experience has been doing a podcast like this, doing the podcast that I've done, and like, this is a few years ago now, but like finally unlocking the fact that the whole reason that I am the person that I am, that I surround myself with the things that I do, the people that I want to be friends with, the conversations that I want to have, is because my first memory, my earliest memory, and certainly my first like truly like happy memory, is sitting on my dad's lap eating a bowl of cereal watching the very first episode of Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Everything else that I do in life is in an effort to get back to that place, right? I didn't come to that realization in therapy. I didn't do it, through hypnosis. I did it by talking about the Ninja Turtles with Missy on this podcast like 2 years ago. So like that exploration, I see so much value in, and I see so much more value in that. And this is again something that has come with age, it's come with wisdom. Now that I'm 40, right? Like I can look at my life and go, how much value did I get out of shitting on X3, right?
Right.
A pretty universally understood bad
Yeah.
entry in the
Yeah,
X-Men
that one's a
films,
stinker.
right? Like, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and we can pull it apart, and we can do a red letter media dissection, and we could put a funny voice over it with some funny graphics, and it's very entertaining to do. But what's the value in it, right? What there is some,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's worth as much as the value of like, but what is it about the X-Men? Why are we having that reaction to X3? It's because we have this deep connection to the X-Men. For me, it's through the 90s cartoon. For others, it's through the Chris Claremont stories from like the 70s and the 80s. It's like what's the thing that we're actually like, what are we actually reacting to, right? And more
Well,
often than not, if you can find that, then you can find the nuggets, you can find the things that are worth pulling out, and you can go, okay, well, if that's the thing that I love, if that's the thing that brings me joy and makes me happy as an artist, that's what I need to be trying to make, right? And it helps. It's honestly, it's like, um, it's sharpening the sword, right? Like, and I just find that love and joy and exuberance about these things, it sharpens the steel so much more effectively than criticism, right?
I
Like,
heard a quote a while ago that I don't remember who said it, but it was something along the lines of like, we spend the first half of our life destroying things and the second half of our life trying to fix things.
hmm,
And I think that that's sort of a commentary on like the hubris of youth or whatever, the arrogance that we have. And then hopefully, if you're in your second half of your life, maybe you learned a few things and you're somewhat tempered. And I think about that a lot when it comes to criticism, as to and also just making content. To your point, like I'm making videos and I'm talking about stuff. When something sucks, I'm not lying to people about my opinion that it sucks, but I also find it interesting. We keep referencing the red letter media guy, but like, bro, why are you so angry about some stuff that's just it's a movie? And like when you're talking about X-Men 3, it's like, man, that was a real stinker and I didn't like it. And I've definitely had my times where I've been really passionate about wanting to hate on something that's really, sometimes it's really fun to just get like, just go on a rant and a
hmm,
tear and get that all out. But
yeah,
I also kind of wonder, now we're looking, this might be a time to talk about algorithms, because what is our, as a person that makes content, I'm making a video and people will say, like, if you want to be successful, do what you love. And that's a very altruistic, real, like, just unreasonable position to be in, because
yeah,
yeah, go ahead and make that and that's totally fine, and I try and do that, I'm bringing that a lot of the times, to like most of the time, to what I'm doing, which is why I don't get a huge amount of views. But then you start realizing the practical aspect of making content is, you need viewers, you need to bring them in, and then you start looking at, well, what brings people in? And
hmm,
there was a guy that isn't around anymore because he got a pain in the neck recently, if you get what I'm saying. And that dude made an entire career off of maximizing anger, frustration,
yeah, yeah,
hatred, all of these things, because they're so incredibly infectious and people grab onto them so quickly, and you get a lot of attention in the hip hop space, and like lots of different spaces, but specifically in the hip hop space, you'll always find somebody running their mouth to put somebody else down because it gets them a bunch of attentions and clicks. And then you see that it's not just a human nature thing. The algorithm is now also realizing that if we just like, man, we can really like the emperor, right? Yes, I feel the hate welling within you. Like so
yeah,
excited to make people frothing at the mouth. And you look at our society and you think, ah, shit, man, this does have a downstream effect on people in general, that we're all so divided that there isn't a certain amount of compassion. And on larger issues like politics, it's obvious why things would be so upsetting. But when you look at like this micro world of like animated cartoons and space sword movies and stuff like that, for people to be so angry and so tribalistic, and I can just
hmm,
say, I thought that Discovery was crap. And I will eventually get through the show and I will watch it, but I'm not like shaking my fist. I'm not starting a letter writing campaign to get a studio to change
Yeah.
this because I think I've got, the right thing. I don't know if we're going to move on from this in a second, but I pulled up this quote that I wanted to say since we're talking about criticism, and I wrote it down. I have a little sheet in my phone in my notes where I just keep quotes that inspire me or things that I want to keep in mind. And I really like this one. This is from Theodore Roosevelt. It is not the critic who counts, nor the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena. And I just feel like if people,
Mhm.
especially critics, if you keep that in mind, then your analysis becomes more thoughtful because you're realizing you're not the guy that made anything. You're making something that you wouldn't be able to make if that guy didn't make something because you'd have nothing to talk about. So I think, there should be some space and some thought and appreciation given to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you talk as you were talking about all that stuff, and you got to the Emperor Palpatine thing, and I was listening to you, and I was just thinking about what Yoda says in Empire Strikes Back when Luke asks, like, is the dark side more powerful? Because it's really easy to fall into that trap and think that that's the case, right? Because negativity is what sells. But Yoda's response is, it's not even like a firm yes or no on the question, but what he says is that it's quicker, more seductive,
Right.
right? And I think that's the core of what's happening there. And I think that, like, even before algorithms, before social media, before even, the internet was a going concern, George Lucas and let's be honest, Lawrence Kasdan, uh, they understood this, right? Like they that's what they were getting at, was that, like, that negative stuff, it's not that it's stronger, it's just that it's quicker to
Yeah.
join you in the fight,
Oh yeah, it's
which
just
is what Yoda
easier to
says,
like
right?
call
It
somebody a name and pick a fight than
Yeah.
it would be to see a fight going on and solve it. I mean, not
It's
not to get too
Yeah.
political or anything, but I mean, I think we're seeing that on the largest level in the world right now with a bully bigot like Donald Trump, who basically
Yeah.
when he was going to get elected was like, "Why can't Biden solve Russia Ukraine? I would solve the Israel Palestine thing one phone call, one
Yeah.
day, I'd get it so easy, so easy." And it's all bullshit. It's super easy for that guy to be the critic. Now he's the man in the ring, and we're going on 6 months of him being in power, and there's more missiles, more bombs, more conflict. And he's going, "Hey, nobody knew this before, but these things are really tough to solve." Like, oh,
Yeah,
come
it's
on,
it's
man.
tricky. Yeah. No, it I mean, I think the whole it's a tough thing to talk about because it ends up sounding like conspiracy theory when I do. But this is all where we're at right now, is all by design.
Yeah,
And I honestly believe that what I do on the internet is in an effort to fight against that design, which is that people are just not literate, right? That doesn't mean, people think that means, oh, you can't read, right? Literacy is not just the mechanical, operation of letters and numbers on a page, right? Literacy is and this is what anybody, it's the age that my girls are at, and so it's the thing, I'm sure you've been hearing this as well. It's not just about the ability to mechanically, sound out the letters and read a word, or, even have sight words, or be able to construct a sentence. It's the ability to read the content, understand it, and then form a coherent thought about it, right?
but yeah,
And
we're
that
talking about critical thinking
literacy,
skills as well, right? Like these
the
things go
critical
hand in
thinking,
hand. Yeah,
all of that stuff, right? That literacy is a thing that has been perpetually undermined by conservatives over the last 40 years, since Reagan, really, right? I mean, like,
yeah,
before that, but Reagan, his administration, and the people that propped him up, that got him into that position, no different than Donald Trump, is, in fact, as a matter, like he's the proto Trump, an actor without really very much political experience at all,
yeah.
that just, was a charismatic leader that you could put into that thing and then manipulate the hell out of.
It's crazy how you
And
can see the slope from like him
right,
to Sarah Palin to Donald Trump, and it keeps getting dumber and more belligerent, and nobody's doing a course
yeah.
correction.
Well, that it could be seen as early as the 90s in Back
Yeah,
to the Future too, right?
yeah.
Like it was right there. Like the analogy isn't even an analogy anymore. It's just, it's just prescient.
Don't you
But
think it also kind of goes all the way back to World War II? Because I've given this a lot of thought as well, and it seems to me that like things that are ghosts of World War II that are rearing their head now are like the American exceptionalism idea that Americans all want to believe that they're the ones that ended World War II, when actually that shit was
mhm,
Russia, dog. Or like,
yeah,
the
yeah,
idea that they were so against Nazis, and yet, nah, you guys recruited all the Nazi soldiers, or sorry, the Nazi scientists. There's
yeah,
a lot of people who were sympathetic to the Nazis in World War II that they rented out Madison Square Garden and had a Klan rally. So that infrastructure of powerful white slave owning people has been in that country. And yet, for the last 50, 60 years, 70 years, 1944, so like, yeah, we're talking over 75 years, they've inundated themselves with the lie that they're this place of freedom while they do Jim Crow, while they do segregation, all of these things that are born out of this country, and yet they've never expunged white supremacy. They've never gotten rid of the Nazis. They've always let it fester underneath. And the truth of that, to your point, is that, yeah, all of this stuff is by design, because those rich slave owners are people that now own giant corporations that have
mhm,
tons of money, and they're unable to do this lobbying and foisting upon people policies that nobody wants, or to convince, what's that other
yep,
quote, if you convince the lowest white man that he's better than the lowest black man, he'll let you pick his pocket. And that's like
yeah.
exactly what we're seeing going on. And it's like, you're right. Like, it's never gone away. It's just always been there.
Well, and I mean the number one way to control the masses and to keep your slaves is to keep them illiterate, right?
Yeah.
Like that's this
Yep.
it was done to African slaves in America, and it was done to the Hebrews in Egypt. Like there's a reason why these cultures have these rich oral traditions
Yes.
stemming back
Yep.
hundreds or thousands of years, and it's not because like they were uneducated. It's because they were kept down. It's because it was taken away from them. Their language was taken, right? So like all of that stuff, I think it's really interesting, and to tie it all back into Lupin
I
and
was going to
anime.
say,
And
and that's why Lupin the Third is the
yeah,
best ever. 10 out of
a-
10.
but to bring it all back into that, to into Miyazaki, I think like one of the reasons why Miyazaki's work stands the test of time and is something that you can go back to, a movie from 1979, you can watch it in 2025 and you can still get value out of it, is because I and it crosses cultural boundaries and all of that stuff. And this character of Lupin is inspired by a French character written by a Japanese artist,
Yeah.
and then brought about by Hayao Miyazaki in this film. Like the it's so easy to give into that bad stuff. It's so easy to get negative. It's so easy to doom scroll and get caught up in these in the dark side, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just the perfect analogy for it. So it's just the best way to communicate that is to just call it what it is, which is the dark side. It's so easy to go that path. It's so seductive to just give into it. But then I watch a movie like this, and Miyazaki's whole thing is like he always has these really interesting, dark, complex, rich characters that are fighting their way out of that darkness. And that aspect, right? Whether it's loneliness or
It's kind of Howl's Moving Castle has a lot of that thematic stuff, like, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, and Mononoke is like is this fight against modernity and
Right.
technology versus the environment
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So Mononoke is very like, she's coming from this very like dark, almost like dangerous place. Not almost, very dangerous. She's a dangerous character, right? But the interesting thing there, and this relates into Lupin, who is a character that comes out of, he's this thief, right? but then what shines through is the heart of gold. What shines through is the motivation, is the goodness, and it's a common thing with, I think, in all of Miyazaki's work. And I think that it's a common thing in Miyazaki himself. You see him in interviews, and he's this disgruntled, grumpy, gruff dude that can't stop making cartoons. And I just, the dichotomy of that, the balance of it, I think is such an important lesson.
Yeah.
All the stuff that we just talked about, bringing all of that full circle, is to look at Miyazaki, look at the characters that he chooses to put front and center in his stories, and in an instance like this, when he's borrowing somebody else's character and telling a story with that what does he do? The first thing that he does is he infuses that character with more goodness than any other version of that character. And I think that that's just
It's
you can
nice. Yeah.
be grumpy, you can be gruff, you can be critical, you can even be a little bit, cynical about things, as long as what you're operating from at the core is still that heart of gold, right? Like that to me is such an important thing.
And I think it
And
also ties back into what we are saying at the very beginning of one of the elements of Castle of Cagliostro that identifies it as a Miyazaki and is kind of through all of Miyazaki's work, and then ties into what you're saying is, again, there are these like fairy tales. Fairy tales are at their most primal, similar to Star Wars, where it's about light against the darkness, and those themes of having, there's always these innocents. If you look at like Castle in the Sky, the plot of which I actually can't fully remember, like why they were chasing her
yeah.
and all the rest of it, but the two main characters looking for Laputa are two innocent kids. They're wide-eyed and they hope for the best and they want what's best for everybody, and that's great. And then the villains feel like they've got this agenda. There's greed. There's, it's somebody, even in Castle of Cagliostro, the Duke. He's a horrible character. He has no redeeming qualities. You can't trust
Hmm.
him or anything, but the motivation for him was simply he wanted treasure. And then you
Hmm.
contrast that with the character of Lupin, who is a thief, and that's really not what he was there for. And like you said, at the end of the movie, the treasure isn't really a big pile of gold that he can run off with or anything like that. And I would have suspected that if in the movie, not all the Lupin movies, but in this Castle of Cagliostro movie at least, if the treasure had been a big pile of gold, I don't see Lupin taking it from her and then leaving. You know, that's
No,
just not in
I,
the man to do that.
well, and there's an interesting thing baked into that character because of the nature of like telling these stories on an ongoing basis. He can never get the big score, because if he gets the big score, the story ends, right? Like that's it. Like
It's
if they if
yeah, it's one of
if
the
they
things
really did get all
that
that money at the beginning, then there's no movie. So it's got to
it's
be counterfeit,
yeah,
right?
it's
Like,
it's one of the things that they mention in this documentary that I watched, where they were saying that there are two tenets of the Lupin show, and one of them is that none of the characters can ever die,
hmm,
like because that's just the nature of who they are. And he was mentioning that in this movie, for example, you don't ever expect anything bad to happen to Lupin, even though, like, the opening when they're chasing down these guys and they're throwing these World War I grenades, tossing them, and there's big explosions, and you're not worried about it. And when they fly off the cliff, you're like, how did Lupin survive that? But there's a moment where one of the Duke's guards shoots Lupin on the roof. And when he falls to the ground and the blood comes out, it's like he somehow is still able to infuse that there is some sort of threat here, even though it's Lupin and nothing bad is going to happen to any of
yeah,
them. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and like you said, I Howl's Moving Castle, or I think you said Howl's
Yep.
Moving Castle. Couldn't tell you what that movie, like the plot of that movie. I couldn't. All of the Miyazaki stuff that I've watched, I don't know that I could give you like a recounting of the plot of any of it. But the thing about Miyazaki, even Castle of Cagliostro, which I have seen the most out of all of his work, I have seen this movie, I don't know, probably at least 10 times. I couldn't have told you before I sat down to rewatch it this morning before recording this podcast what the plot was,
Right.
but I could tell you how it made me feel. Same with Totoro, same with Ponyo, same with Mononoke, right? Like and some of them more than others. I can kind of, remember the plot a little bit, but it's such a funny thing to walk away from those movies, and
Yes.
I think this is such a Western idea of like the plot is the most important thing in the film. And I've been really trying to get across to people lately that like I really don't care what happens in the plot.
That's how I
Like the
feel
plot,
about noir movies. Like I'm a huge fan of the
yeah,
old Maltese Falcon and all that, and I will watch them
yeah,
endlessly. And if I watch it with Kathy, my wife, if I watch it with her, she will be like, "I don't get what just happened there." And then every single time I'm like, "I don't care." She's like, "What do you mean? You're
yeah,
watching the movie. You're not invested?" And I'm like, "I am invested." But
yeah.
these Agatha Christie
It
type
it was a
mysteries,
double cross, guys.
yeah,
That's it. That's
exactly,
all you
and
need
it
to
could have
know.
been a triple cross. I don't need to follow it.
Yeah,
There's something aesthetically that I'm liking about it. I like the mood, I like the look,
yeah,
I like the genre,
yeah,
I like the dialogue, and all these different things. And it's not like Chinatown doesn't have a great plot that I can follow, but or the Maltese Falcon, but when it gets into these intricacies of somebody explaining it all, and I'm like, I don't know if I got it all. And you talk to somebody about a movie, like I remember we both know Andrew. I remember talking to him about Thor 2 The Dark World. And I was like,
hmm,
yeah, I liked it. And he was like, oh, so awful. And then he starts going into all these explanations about how the portals that were opening, where they opened on the other world, doesn't make sense because the angle that they were at. And I was like, man,
yeah,
I don't think you're watching the right kind of movie because that's not really what this was about. And I was also
yeah,
going to mention, to your point about not remembering the plots for Miyazaki movies. Yeah, when I said the thing about Howl's Moving Castle, like I couldn't tell you what the plot of Howl's Moving Castle is, but Miyazaki has a way, the way fairy tales do, of burning
hmm,
iconic images. The house that
yep,
walks around, and Howl himself. The reason why I said this thing about how he has this duality is because one of the biggest uh, sort of icons visually that's in my head is Howl turns into this big dragon type guy, right? Like he turns into this thing, but he's all dark and brooding and black, and by the end of it, he turns into sort of like a white dove dragon or whatever when like evil or toxin or whatever is like when they've solved this problem, this
yeah,
conflict he has, he's better. And there's something similar that happens in Spirited Away when they go to the bathhouse, and the little girl is doing all the little work for them, and then that big, I don't know what any of the characters are called, sorry, but the big shy guy basically comes in. He's like a
yeah.
swamp creature, and he's just consumed with all this bile and toxicity and whatever it is, and they got to like scrub it out of him. And like there's a redemption there. There's talking about what, without talking about it, it's kind of showing you like evil, these toxic thoughts, these bad things, cynicism, negativity, apathy, that's going to eat away at your core. And he has a brilliant way in this sort of fairy tale kind of ubiquitous, everyone can understand it way that he brings those stories to light. Kathleen Kennedy, in this documentary, they were saying that Spielberg, Kathleen Kennedy, and a few other people in that camp were fans of Miyazaki and Castle of Cagliostro in the 80s before the 91 dubbed release that America got, because they went to a film fest, like they got to see it and it was in
Hmm.
Japanese. And so they would have a Japanese cut with no English. And they would all watch it and they would show their kids. And they said their kids would watch it, even though the whole thing's in Japanese, because similar to, believe I heard this about Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first like 15, 20 minutes of that opening scene in Raiders. I think it was Soderbergh, maybe. Steven Soderbergh was talking about how if you mute the movie, you don't really lose anything
Yep.
because everything is visually transmitted and easily as enjoyable. And that Castle of Cagliostro was done the same way. That if you don't know what anyone is saying, they're telegraphing, they're showing you the rings, they're showing how they go together, they're displaying people's behavior in a way that it doesn't transcend dialogue, but I mean, I guess it transcends it. It's just you don't need the dialogue to get all of
It's
that.
yeah. There's a. I mean, I said it in the intro. I referred to it. It's not because a lot of people will go to the Ghibli style,
Right.
right? There's Miyazaki's got a style, his style, the way that he draws faces, the way that he draws food, the way that he draws these mechanical things, which we've certainly talked about. But to me, when it comes to Miyazaki, it's the craftsmanship. above all else. And that's the same for early Spielberg stuff. It's honestly, it's the thing that I think is lost in a lot of his newer things. Like sort of like I don't know. I think War of the Worlds was probably the last time that Spielberg was kind of doing like really paying attention to his craftsmanship.
Right.
Although I haven't seen Munich, and everybody says the Munich is really good,
I'm a
but
few behind on his filmography as well.
yeah, and I'm the same, right? And the reason why is because like it kind of got to a point with like Minority Report where it started to be about the special effects. It stopped being about story. It stopped being about craftsmanship, and it all just felt kind of very rote and by the numbers. But when you go back to his early stuff, you go back to Jaws, you go back to Raiders, Close Encounters, those first few entries in his oeuvre, you look at it and you go like any one of those three movies that I just mentioned, you turn off the sound, you can make them black and white, and people have done this,
Yeah.
right? Like there's a version of Raiders that's I think on YouTube that you can watch that is in black and white with no sound, and you can watch that movie and know exactly what's going on, and it's compelling and entertaining, because the
Those are the
way that the
hallmarks of great
shots,
filmmakers, I think,
right?
is
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, because they
like it's just yeah, it just comes down to that craftsmanship, right? It's about knowing your medium. It's about knowing the tricks as well as the pitfalls,
mhm.
which I think that a lot of filmmakers either know one or the other, right? But they're the really truly great ones understand both, and they'll use them both to their advantage,
Although I
even the
suppose
pitfalls, right?
although I suppose to be fair, like one of my favorite all-time films, I was just trying to think like can I test this supposition and
Yeah,
and prove it right or wrong? And I guess that doesn't apply to Reservoir Dogs. Because if you don't have the dialogue or Clerks for that matter, which I think both of
sure.
those movies are amazing, but I guess you also have to pick your arena, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah, but look at Smith and Tarantino, I both being very much of the same ilk, right?
Yeah, cut
Different
from the same
approaches
cloth.
to it, but very much the same type of filmmakers. And what it like I look at a Tarantino movie, and yeah, there are ones with some incredible spectacle, right? Kill Bill, right?
Mhm.
I think like Django is such a visually arresting film,
Totally.
but what is the thing that we go to a Tarantino movie for? We go for the dialogue and the performance. It's theater.
Yeah.
It's what Tarantino and I think what Kevin Smith also bring to that is, and it's the reason why they reuse the same actors, and like they go to the same well over and over and over again, is because like watching a Tarantino or a Kevin Smith movie is the same thing as going to like a repertory theater. It's like, oh, I know these players, I know these actors, but like, how are they going to do this? How are
Right.
they going to deliver this monologue? What's this soliloquy going to be? Who's going to get the standout performance here? Right? Like, who's going to step into the spotlight and start delivering these lines and just blow us away? And that's what I watch those movies for. But then when I watch Spielberg, I like the number one thing that I watch Spielberg movies for now, ever since it was kind of unlocked for me, was somebody did like a dissection of that scene in Jaws where they get on the ferry, and it's a oneer, right? And
Right.
it's a oneer in 1975, right? Like with gigantic cameras, and they're on water, and
Yeah.
it's like this is an impossible shot by most people's standards, and he blocked that shot and worked with that camera crew to execute 60, 70 different shots within that oneer. It's not just a camera that follows down a hallway like in Daredevil, right? Like it's not that type of a oneer. It you don't realize that the movie hasn't made a cut until somebody tells you that the movie hasn't made a cut. Then you go back and you watch it and you go like, unbelievable. And it's because he knew
Yes.
exactly where the camera was, he knew where the actors would be, he knew where he was going to stand, where the everybody, it's like ballet, right? Like it's choreographed, and it's a beautiful piece of art.
I have a
And I love watching that scene because I just love looking at it and going like, he just thought about it. That's the craftsmanship, right? He thought about every single aspect of that. I want them in a two shot now. I want to pull back and have an establishing. I want to go in on a close up. But we're gonna do all this at once. We're not gonna cut. We're gonna do it all in the camera. You guys are gonna need to move there, there, there. And meanwhile, this ferry is literally doing like a like a 360 in the water as it goes to the other side, and like it's such genius stuff.
I actually have
And that's
a favorite shot of Spielberg's from his whole filmography. It's, if anybody wants to check it out, it's the opening shot of Lost World. And I never thought about it before. I forget who mentioned it to me, but now I think about it every time I think about like the simplicity and the genius of like directing. And so it's I think you see the sky, and then it pans down and you see the horizon line of water, and then
hmm,
it pans to I think it's the right, and a boat comes into view that's on the horizon that's out in this water, and then you pull back and you realize that all of a sudden coming into view is a champagne glass that's getting poured into, which then as you pull back you realize is on the hand of a servant, who then the camera follows as the champagne glass gets delivered to the rich white person that's enjoying their, clearly came from the boat and is on the beach. And then a little girl runs by and is like, Mama, I'm going to go play or whatever. And then she goes and gets killed or attacked by the compies, right? But like that opening shot had no words, no special effects, and it established everything like time of day, where you are, that there's a yacht, that it's a rich person, that you're on the beach, and you didn't need words, you didn't need dialogue. And he does it in like 15 seconds. And the part to me that makes it so amazing is that when somebody pointed this out to me, I'd probably seen The Lost World like a half dozen times, but you would never stop and think that's the genius, amazing shot in the movie because it's so
yeah.
understated. It's, it just happens and that's it. And you don't think about it. But this guy put together this really amazingly great shot and then doesn't, no one's talking about it. It's not the
And
bullet time shot, it's the one that no one noticed.
yeah, and you know what? Like the reason why Spielberg is able to do stuff like that and why he's able to I think stand out in those early days of his career and become the director that he becomes known as is because he's watching Castle of Cagliostro,
Yeah, that's right.
right?
And the
Like
man from
that's the
Rio,
thing.
and yeah.
Yeah, it's that he did not keep his, and this is the same with George Lucas, right? He didn't just do his version of Flash Gordon. He infused it with Kurosawa. He brought in all of the spaghetti western stuff. He looked at everything that he ever loved, Casablanca, like just everything, and he just put it all into his art,
Yeah.
right? And it was not from a homogenous place. It was from all of this variety. And I think like that's the thing that makes them genius, is as opposed to us who are just kind of like grabbing the scraps that are falling off of their tables, is that you think about how old they were when they were doing that, when like how tuned in they were. And Miyazaki is the same. I mean, like he like from the beginning of his career he was a genius. It like that's exactly what it is. It took me a long time to learn that I needed to watch something other than Star Wars movies in order to learn how to make a Star Wars,
For
right?
sure.
Like it wasn't until I was in my like late 20s early 30s that I really started to understand that. And I don't think it's really until now even that I'm making my own stuff that I'm truly understanding that perspective of like, yeah, you can't just pull from one well. You have to get your ingredients from all over the
Yeah, this
place
is
if you
the
want to
the
make something
guitar.
interesting.
Yeah, this is the guitar example again, where it's like you have to learn all the different styles of the greats, but then
Yeah.
once you decide to create something new, these are the things you're pulling from. And if you know everything, you know what's good and what's not, and hopefully you're pulling from the best. And that is that sort of Tarantino style as well.
Yeah, for sure. I well, listen, I think we did it. I think that that was a
Okay.
podcast.
Okay, can I add
I
one more thing I just want to add in
Absolutely.
for the Miyazaki fans. I'm going to say the casual Miyazaki fans because hardcore Miyazaki fans are already going to know this, but I feel like most people that know Miyazaki, Howl's Moving Castle, Ponyo, Spirited Away, Castle of Cagliostro, Castle in the Sky, when Disney, I think it was Disney, like
Mhm.
repackaged and redubbed all these movies, Princess Mononoke, we kind of all saw the main ones. But if you want to see a really weird old Miyazaki movie, check out Pompoko. It is a animated movie about a family and tribe of tanukis, and they're all drawn with giant testicles. And
Yes.
that's just the weirdest thing. I showed my kid the other day. She was like, "What?" And I was like, "Look at the back of the box." And there's like 13 tanukis all jumping with their giant ball sacks like they're like parachutes. And it's really
Yeah.
bizarre because it's a cultural thing in Japan that we just don't understand in the West. But yeah, if you because we're just talking about all this stuff. He did Tales of Earthsea, or whatever, like these
Yeah. Yeah.
beautiful fairy tales. He also drew a whole bunch of nutsacks. So
Yeah.
yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, he contains multitudes.
Yeah.
I awesome. Well, Jonny, if people want to hear you rant about more things on the internet, or more accurately, I talk about these things that you love,
In a constructive and positive way.
yeah, where can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the channel is the Moosh Tube. That's MUSH Tube. The icon, the little profile pic, is like this aquamarine stylized version of my bulldog Mushu. And that's the YouTube channel. And then on Instagram and Facebook, it's Metropolis Comics and Toys, based off the shop. But I still post there regularly. Try and post some comic reviews every once in a while. Generally link my new videos there, and talk with people in the stories. If you want more of my politicalness, I generally put those in the stories and try and keep my posts to things that are more comic related and not as spicy.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Jonny, for joining me on this one. If you guys want to join the conversation, you can head over to our Discord server at thunderquack.com/discord. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast service and leave a rating and review. And this is the new thing that I've added. Always share it with a friend. Send this to somebody who wants to hear
call
us.
to action.
Yeah,
you got to click the like button, click the follow. This is how the algorithm works. If you guys, not everybody's got money, but if you're listening and you want to contribute, really you can do it for free. You can suggest, if you put a link on your page and you have 3 friends that click on that and they like it, and they might tell a friend, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
That's really, I try and do that. And it's annoying because nobody wants to hear us ask for your support to click on things. People generally, I think, are pretty apathetic, and it's like, yeah, man, I can't click like on everything I watch. And that's totally true. But if people out there were wondering, like, I wish I could contribute, I think that those things really do wonders.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And the best thing for a podcast is a recommendation from a friend, right?
Totally.
Like that's it's really the only way that people discover new things these days. So, other than, if I posted 3,000 videos on TikTok and then one of them takes off.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, remember, it's not about the score. It's about the love. Stay frosty. Thunderquack Perfect 10 is hosted by me, Michael Cohen. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at TQPerfect10, and join the community at thunderquack.com/discord. This podcast is supported by listeners just like you over at patreon.com/thunderquack. Head over there to get early access to episodes, exclusive podcasts, and more. This show is a part of the Thunderquack Podcast Network. Head over to thunderquack.com for more great shows. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.